You are listening to Dial M for Miami, Season 1, Cracks in the Foundation, the Sergio Pino story, a true crime podcast produced by Hurrdat Media and hosted by me, Ana Quincoces. Before we begin, I'd like my audience to be aware that the content of this podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any organizations or individuals referenced. All individuals mentioned in this podcast are considered innocent until proven guilty. While we make every effort to ensure the accuracy of the information presented, we cannot guarantee that all details are accurate or up to date. Any errors or omissions are unintentional. This podcast does not intend to defame or harm the reputation of any individual, and any statements made should be interpreted in the context of public commentary and storytelling. We begin with episode 1 of this series, a journey much like a roller coaster colliding with a labyrinth. It's full of dizzying highs and crushing lows, sharp twists and unexpected turns, and just when you think you've unraveled the mystery, you find yourself right back at a dead end, tangled once more in the intricate threads of this saga. Episode 1, Blueprint to Deception. In the early morning of July 16, 2024, the life of Sergio Pino, a man who once held the keys to Miami's future, came to a very tragic and abrupt end.
Sergio Pino had been accused in his divorce case of trying to harm and intimidate his wife of 32 years. And the FBI was moving in when he ended it inside his Coral Gables home.
At 67 years old, Sergio found himself all alone, ensconced inside his Coral Gables estate. But just outside the very walls he built, a much more precarious situation was unfolding. The scene was like something out of a movie. This kind of thing doesn't happen in this neighborhood. It just doesn't. FBI and SWAT were swarming his property as if he were public enemy number 1, blocking all access to the street surrounding Isla Dorada Boulevard, where Pino had lived for years. They had helicopters hovering overhead, agents with megaphones attempting to coax a real estate mogul from inside his home. But there was no response from Pino. The whole ordeal started in the early morning. Neighbors were awakened by the sounds of stun grenades, a non-lethal device used by law enforcement to alert or disorient targets. The streets surrounding his home were buzzing with people from the neighborhood, surely in disbelief of the chaos unfolding in their affluent enclave. As expected, cell phones were out as people texted and called other neighbors and took video and photos to document every second of the unthinkable ordeal. Even one prominent Miami influencer who lives on Tahiti Beach, an even more exclusive waterfront section of Coco Plum, posted stories on Instagram while on her yacht, claiming that it was her only source of egress from the neighborhood due to overwhelming police presence. And through all of this, still no signs of Pino. I watched the news, mouth agape. Sergio Pino was a household name for so many, especially those in the real estate industry. As a real estate lawyer myself, I had done many a closing involving Sergio's bank and his developments. And now he's being accused of a murder for hire plot, accused of arson, intimidation, and the systematic poisoning of Tatiana, his now estranged wife. It turns out Pino was inside his home as this whole fiasco was going on just outside his compound, but he remained sequestered in a bedroom and refusing to surrender.
For 2 years, allegations of arson, stalking, and poisoning marred the divorce case of Sergio and Tatiana Pino. But after what her attorney alleged in court papers today was an attempt to murder her last month, the FBI says this case became a murder for hire case. And today, the man at the center of it was found in his house back there, dead with a self-inflicted gunshot.
As dozens of FBI closed in on Pino's home, announcing they were ready to breach the front door, Sergio made one final decision, an unthinkable decision. He raised a gun to his temple, the cold metal pressed against his skin, and pulled the trigger. Sergio had hired prominent criminal defense attorney Sam Rabin, who was outside the home feverishly pacing as the events were unfolding. But the FBI refused to let him enter. Sources say that Rabin tried repeatedly to reach Sergio on his cell phone, but despite his best efforts, he was never able to reach his friend and client. Later, he issued the following statement, expressing his disappointment in the actions by law enforcement. Sergio Pino took his life today, Rabin said. The level of law enforcement activity at his residence was unprecedented and unnecessary, especially since we had offered to surrender him should that have become necessary. Today's events mark a very tragic ending to an investigation that we were confident we could successfully defend. There were many rumors and allegations, but what was lacking was evidence, end quote. Truth is that there was plenty of evidence, but it was mostly circumstantial. Perhaps not enough for beyond a reasonable doubt. Rabin maintains, however, that the absence of solid evidence against Pino would have made mounting a defense relatively straightforward. I suppose that without concrete proof linking Pino to the alleged plot, the defense strategy could just focus on creating doubt and pointing out the prosecution's inability to substantiate their claims. Still, 9 men have been arrested in connection with Sergio Pino's murder-for-hire case, where it is said he engaged murder crews to kill Tatiana. Although these so-called murder crews were connected to Sergio through intermediaries, at least 2 had worked for Sergio in some capacity before.
As federal law enforcement sees it, all roads in this investigation lead to Sergio Pino.
Our evidence has shown he hired and gave orders to murder crews.
The first involved these 4 men arrested in March. According to court filings, not charged with murder, but rather arsons, car set afire outside Tatiana Pino's sister's house, and stalking, including this, the August 2023 ramming of her car as she returned home from a divorce court hearing.
The first group of hitmen he allegedly hired to kill Tatiana failed. Pino then allegedly hired a second team led by Fausto Rafael Villar, a man who had worked on Pino's home. A notice of commencement listed his wife's company as his employer. Villar recruited 4 other men for the job. The crews attempted to carry out several attacks, including a hit and run and an armed confrontation. But those attempts failed as well.
In May of this year, Sergio Pino filed this notice of commencement with the county clerk, naming the contractor doing the roofing work here. And the owner of that company, according to the federal complaint, is the wife of the man who organized the second crew. That man, Fausto Villar, is charged with murder for hire, along with Avery Bivens. Bivens said Villar, Pino's roofer, recruited him to assemble what the FBI called the second murder crew for a $300,000 job.
It kind of makes you wonder, were these men just not very good hitmen? Or is it that they never actually intended to kill Tatiana? Perhaps Pino's goal was simply to scare his wife and not actually murder her. But scare her into what? Settling for less money in their contentious divorce? Or maybe it was to keep her from speaking out. What information does Tatiana have, if any? And will we ever find out now that Sergio's gone? Let's go back to the not-so-competent murder crews. According to news reports, Pino had promised $150,000 for the murder and another $150,000 as long as they couldn't trace it back to him. That sounds like a bargain given how many people were involved. I wonder what, if anything, he paid them for not 1 but 2 botched jobs. As of this recording, there really hasn't been much talk about these men. I mean, so far it seems that they have remained pretty tight-lipped. One would think that with Pino gone, they would attempt to shift the majority of the blame to him. I mean, Pino's death certainly made him an easy scapegoat. Obviously, these guys will still be on the hook for their direct actions. But if Pino was the mastermind in the murder-for-hire scheme, speaking out even against each other could possibly help mitigate their sentences. Unless Pino stayed so far from the sidelines that they actually have no information to provide law enforcement. You see, the way these plea deals work is that the defendant has to provide substantial new information. But if they don't have much to offer beyond what we all already know, then their ability to negotiate is very limited. There's also another angle here, and that's the fear of repercussion. Some theories suggest that Pino had been involved with foreign business associates or criminal elements. If that is indeed the case, then those arrested might fear retaliation for speaking out. Admitting to involvement, even with Pino gone, could put them at risk from others who were part of the broader scheme. Those close to Pino remain so shocked that he made the decision to take his own life. Family and employees are just still in total disbelief. One thing almost everyone I've spoken to agrees on is that Pino was so proud, just too proud to submit to being forcibly removed from his own home. With TV cameras, reporters, the drones, helicopters, not to mention the onlookers, especially on the streets of exclusive Coco Plum. And so just like that, because of pride or fear of retaliation, or because he just could not fight the insurmountable evidence stacked against him, Pino took his own life. Did he think it through? Or did he do it on a whim? Letters discovered later suggest that he knew this might be a possibility. And so in an instant, that life that he had meticulously crafted, the empire he forged with blood, sweat, and tears, and the influence and reputation he wielded came to a violent and tragic end by his own hand and on his very own terms. But to understand how a man like Pino, a self-made multimillionaire, a prominent figure in the Miami real estate scene, and perhaps the most influential Hispanic homebuilder in the U.S., found himself in such a dire situation, we're going to need to go back, way back, to the very beginning. This is a story not just of ambition and success, but of a life shaped by choices, both good and bad. It's a story that begins not in the high rises of Miami, where Pino inked many a deal, but in the small, vibrant streets of Cuba. Sergio Pino was born in Havana. The year was 1956, a time when the world was about to change drastically. His early years were marked by the Cuban Revolution, a period of turmoil that would eventually lead his family to seek a new life in the United States. Sergio set foot on U.S. soil when he was just 12 years old. But even at that young age, Sergio made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He was going to build houses, he said, lots of them. This wasn't just a passing childhood dream. It was a vision. It was a manifestation, if you will, one that stayed with him through the difficult years adjusting to life in a new country. Sergio, along with his parents and his brother Carlos, fled Cuba in 1969, and like many Cuban immigrants before them, made Miami their home, a place that welcomed many a displaced Cuban looking for opportunities and willing to work hard to achieve them. Once settled in Miami, he attended Miami Senior High School and later Miami-Dade Community College. His parents made ends meet working odd jobs, sometimes even at below minimum wage. Soon after his 2 years at Miami-Dade College, Sergio borrowed $6,000 from his dad, and he bought a small plumbing supply company in Hialeah. It really didn't take long for Sergio to make a name for himself with Century Plumbing. That little unassuming plumbing supply company that he purchased with money he borrowed from his dad became the plumbing supply wholesaler for many developers in South Florida. Sergio's work ethic was really undeniable, and those around him quickly realized that he was destined for more, much more. After all, Miami was a city on the rise, and Pino was among the first to see this as an opportunity to make his mark. By the time he was in his mid-20s, he was well on his way. With the experience he gained building Century Plumbing, Sergio transitioned into the world of real estate development and founded Century Home Builders, a company that became a household name around here and would grow to become one of the largest private home builders in South Florida. Sergio's vision was clear. He wanted to build homes, but not just any homes. He wanted to build homes that reflected the spirit of Miami, the Magic City, a city that was both diverse and dynamic. Under his leadership, Century Home Builders thrived, creating neighborhoods that would become an integral part of Miami's landscape. But success, as it often does, comes with a price. And as Sergio's empire expanded, so too did the pressures of running a large-scale business in a volatile market. The demands were enormous, and soon they began to take their toll on him. By the early 2000s, Sergio's life was really a balancing act. On one side, there was his business, thriving and expanding. On the other, his personal life, which was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. The real estate market was booming, but it was also unpredictable. The pressure to maintain his success weighed heavily on him, and the lines between his professional and his personal life were really starting to blur. Among his many endeavors, he founded U.S. Century Bank, an accomplishment he was quite proud of. But after a few years running the financial institution, he encountered some trouble. Turns out that bank regulators suspected that Pino was using the deposits held by the financial institution to bankroll his own developments. And by most accounts, he was. So rather than deal with the potential fallout, he simply resigned from the board. By 2008, the real estate bubble and the mortgage financing crisis took a toll on Century Home Builders, as it did on everyone in that industry. And for the first time in a very long time, Pino was strapped for cash. But Pino always understood the power of networking. He nurtured strong relationships in the banking world as well as with other big names in real estate development. He had a solid record building homes at an impressive clip. His deep involvement with the Latin Builders Association, of which he had held the title of president, was also very useful to him when times were tough. And let's not forget the Midas touch reputation that preceded him. Sergio, no doubt, was able to find his footing among the chaos. And like most successful self-made individuals, Pino encountered a few obstacles on his path to financial success, of course. But he was never one to back down, never. Sergio was never going to accept failure. He was just a very proud man. He had come too far to fail, from his youth in Cuba to living through the revolution, to the little plumbing store he bought in Hialeah with the $6,000 borrowed from his dad, to being one of the biggest developers around. Pino had come a long way, baby, and he was going to power through no matter what. Throughout this time, Pino was well into his second marriage to Tatiana, a beautiful woman, 12 years his junior, whom he met at a business owned by her parents. At the time, he was married to his first wife, with whom he had 2 children, but meeting Tatiana was, by all accounts, the demise of that union. And not long after his divorce, he started a new life with his young bride. The marriage seemed happy at first. I would occasionally even run into them, and it was evidence that he took great pride in what many considered his trophy wife. But to be honest, I always saw Tatiana as much more than just arm candy. To me, it was clear that her love for Sergio was genuine. I even recall an anecdote of her inviting him to her senior prom, and all the gossip and stares and the general outrage that ensued as a result. Needless to say, he was by far the oldest date there, but she could not have been more proud to have him by her side. Word on the street is that while his first wife endured many of Sergio's indiscretions, it was really only after that infamous prom date that she filed for divorce. Sergio and Tatiana eventually had 2 beautiful daughters, Alessandra and Carolina, and for a time, at least to the outside world, they seemed quite happy. In 2022, Tatiana filed for divorce after 32 years of marriage, a relationship that many recount had slowly disintegrated under the weight of Sergio's alleged infidelity and emotional distance, and the small detail that he repeatedly tried to poison her. More on that later. But what made the divorce even more explosive was Tatiana's attempt to invalidate the prenuptial agreement, which in my opinion was technically a postnuptial agreement, since it was signed after their civil ceremony in April 1990. The agreement Tatiana signed the day before their lavish religious wedding in May was allegedly forced upon her with little time to reflect or seek the advice of a lawyer. Tatiana claims that Sergio framed it just as a formality, but in reality, the purpose of the document was to limit her claim to his growing fortune.
The 20-page document gives Sergio full rights to his premarital property. The agreement says that all of the property now owned by Pino shall remain his sole and separate property throughout the marriage. In addition, all interests of any kind in the corporations controlled by Pino prior to the marriage shall remain as Pino's property alone.
His net worth at that time was reportedly $15.8 million. I really can't help but contemplate that had Tatiana refused to sign, she might have missed out on the extravagant wedding, but she would still have been Mrs. Pino, with full rights to all of their shared assets. When Sergio offered Tatiana a $20 million settlement during the divorce, naturally she refused. After decades of loyalty and enduring public humiliation, personal betrayals, and, that little matter of the repetitive attempts to poison her, Tatiana believed she deserved much more, to the tune of $80 million more. Refusing his offer set the stage for a very bitter legal battle, one that threatened to bring all their darkest secrets to light. What were Tatiana's odds of successfully voiding the agreement which she claims was signed under duress? And if she had, just how much would she have walked away with had Sergio not taken his own life? And how much of his estate will she be entitled to now that he's gone? And what really was his net worth? Was it vastly exaggerated as many believe? So many questions. But the cracks began to appear many years before 2024 in the facade of Sergio Pino's success. The real estate market, once a source of endless opportunity, became a source of stress and uncertainty. And according to many, his net worth was not what it seemed. Was it all really big hat, no cattle? Legal battles, financial pressures, and personal conflicts began to mount. Sergio, who had once seemed invincible, now struggled to keep everything together. And then there was the issue that would ultimately lead to his downfall, his relationship with Tatiana, a woman who, by most accounts, stood by him for 3 decades without a single indiscretion of her own, despite the ever-present whispers of infidelity. In the midst of all this turmoil, he meets Nancy Pastor, a woman who has played a significant role in Pino's life. Sure, Sergio had many indiscretions while married to Tatiana, but Nancy was different. Dare I say she was the one? I mean, with a man like Sergio, that concept takes on a whole new meaning. What I will say is that for 15 years, she was a lot more than just a mistress. By all accounts, she was his confidant and business associate, and in his own words, one of the few people who knew how to speak to him, who truly understood him, and whom he trusted completely. Those are big words coming from a man like Pino. How they met depends on who you ask. A former partner of Sergio's recalls the day they met at a Latin Builders Association luncheon and how he was instantly smitten. Another account is that they met at a Miami Heat game with seats gifted to their important developer client by the bank where Nancy worked. The one thing that is consistent about both stories is that the connection was instantaneous and undeniable. Sergio drove her home after the game that night, and the rest, as it turns out, is history. But it seems this relationship wasn't all about chemistry and romance. Nancy became much more to Sergio, and he came to rely on her, as we will explore later in this series. Fast forward now to 2024. Few who knew Sergio could deny that the accusations that surfaced were shocking. Sergio Pino, a man who had built a life on the foundation of hard work, of family, community, and even philanthropy, was accused of plotting to murder his wife? The details of this case are complex and troubling. I have personally spent countless hours interviewing Sergio Pino's partners, colleagues, former employees, and many friends. Armed with a plethora of information about a man I knew only peripherally, I set out to uncover the story behind the story behind the story. The one question on everyone's mind is why? Was there more beneath the surface? Conspiracy theories abound, as they often do in Miami circles, with one of the most persistent of them suggesting a massive debt owed to a foreign business associate who was growing impatient. Some have speculated that rather than taking his life, Pino could just have fled to Cuba or even Spain before he relinquished his passport, since there's no extradition there. But if in fact there were people he owed vast sums of money to, That would have been a pretty short-lived solution. Not to mention that if he didn't have all the money people assumed he had, how would he live the rest of his life in hiding? Many in Miami seem to have their own take on his uncharacteristic behavior. Will we ever truly uncover what was going through his mind when he made the irreversible decision to end his life? That mystery, for now, remains a subject of intense debate. In this series, we'll explore the rise and ultimate demise of Sergio Pino, a man from humble beginnings who came to the U.S. with little more than the clothes on his back and managed to amass an estimated net worth of $360 million. But the full extent of Sergio Pino's actual fortune and how much of it was encumbered by debt will likely be revealed throughout the ongoing probate process. Pino's wealth was tied to his real estate ventures, including his company, Century Home Builders, that over the years had built more than 16,000 homes. However, with rumors of mounting business debts and the ongoing divorce with Tatiana, his financial situation might have been more dire than any of us knew. Who was Sergio Pino, really? Was he that charming, astute, hard-working family man and real estate tycoon we all perceived him to be? Or was there a darker side, one he concealed and kept in check until something just pushed him over the edge? But what? Money? Sergio was a master at making money. Even if his contentious divorce had cost him half his vast fortune, he could have refilled his coffers easily. Surely that was a better choice than taking his own life. I mean, what value did his fortune hold if he wasn't alive to enjoy it? There's so many theories that may have contributed to the immense pressure Sergio Pino was under, pressure that potentially led to his final and fatal decision. Given their messy divorce and the allegations Tatiana made, it is plausible that she held sensitive information that could have harmed Sergio, both personally and professionally. Tatiana was reportedly seeking half of his net worth during the divorce proceedings. Had Sergio given in to her demands, it could have significantly drained his financial resources. This could have put him in a really vulnerable position, especially if he owed substantial amounts to these alleged foreign associates, as some theories suggest. If Sergio was indeed seriously in debt, the pressure to repay those debts would have been considerable. The fear of potential retaliation for not doing so, no doubt, could certainly have escalated his sense of desperation. Join us next time as we attempt to answer these questions and continue to explore the surreal story of Sergio Pino, a complex man who juggled business and people like a seasoned performer walking a tightrope, always just one step away from the edge. This has been Dial M for Miami, a Hurrdat Media production. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review so you don't miss a single moment of Cracks in the Foundation, the Sergio Pino story. Thank you for joining me. I'm Ana Quincoces.